Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of this video. If you missed the first one, we just did a little quick tutorial on how we grow sphagnum moss. So we use this, oops, it's draining out there. We use this container, and I just described how I grew this. And from here, I'm going to show you how to make a top dressing for your carnivorous plants or your orchids or anything else that loves high humidity. And you just want that nice look and the appeal of the live moss on the top of it. So why don't I bring you down? I'm going to grab a few Nepenthes, grab a few tools, and I will show you how I do the top dressing on my plants. Okay, so I laid out a few things in front of us. A few plants to work with, some moss to work with, and a few tools to work with. So why don't we go through first, and I'm going to show you the two tools. These are my main two tools that I use in the greenhouse all the time for doing my fine little bits of work. Planting up the moss in a top dressing style is tedious potentially, but it just depends how tedious you want to make it as well. So there's two ways to do a top dressing of moss. First, we're going to look at this guy here. This is my Rob Kentley, and I did a top dressing on moss of this guy just the quick way, and I just literally threw the moss on top, and it's starting to grow. And in a few more months, it's going to look very nice and be all fluffy and stuff just like the rest, but it does take a while to get there when you just sort of lay the moss on top. And I'm the kind of person that likes to be a little bit more tedious than that, so I'm going to put that guy off to the side for a second. And I like to get the looks like these guys have here. So this guy here is an intermus. He's looking really good right now, a mixture of green and red. Lingulata, same thing, mixture of green and red, and a little hamada here. So I like that look, and I like it to be there pretty much instantly. And the way I do that is I'm just going to harvest the heads of the moss off a few of the plants and off my main colony in the background. And then what we'll do is together we will work on the Attenborough. This is one of my newer plants that doesn't have a top dressing yet. So you can see it's not live moss all the way down. It's still your regular mix, whatever you're going to use, and then just a top dressing on top of that. So why don't we get started here? Now let's start with the actual colony. So on the colony back here, we're going to swing you around. I am not looking to rip up this colony at all. I'm just looking to take from it. So I want to take the active growth tips. So all I do is I lay this down and I just start snipping some growth tips. And this does take a while. I said that it's not for somebody who's in a hurry. You need to have a little bit of time to do this. And I work on it. Sometimes I'll grab 3 or 4 growth tips at once and just kind of scissor along. And I take off the tops just like that. And I allow the bottoms to keep growing. So you can see what I'm going to be doing here. And these active growth tips are just the quickest growing part of the plant. They're already growing, and you can see you want to keep them about that long. Now this is my colony of moss that's just growing under low light right now. Sorry, that wouldn't focus. It's just growing under low light right now, so they're kind of spindly little heads of moss. Now these guys over here are also growing, and you got to keep your moss trimmed back when you're in these plants. Otherwise they will just overtake the plant, especially when they're small. So it's always good to trim them up as well. So why don't we take some from this hamada first. It's a little plant, and you can definitely see some of the leaves are getting buried anyways under it. So just do a quick shot there. And we had a little accident with the lid on it right there. So you got to always make sure that you're careful with your plants or they end up losing the lid. But I'm just going to take some heads from here as well. I don't necessarily want to take all the heads. I don't want to leave it empty so it has to completely regrow, but you can take sort of half the heads, and being these heads have been growing under better light, they're going to be darker to start with and a lot thicker as well, so that's kind of nice. And all I'm doing is taking from around there, and this is just maintenance that has to be done when you have the sphagnum moss anyways. You got to keep the plant so it's not going to be overwhelmed by the moss. You can see why excuse me. You can see why I use the little scissors. You have to be very careful around the plants. You don't want to take any kind of big scissors, but we'll just trim it up and allow light to get back down to the leaves of the plant. Now in a bigger plant that's not so, you know, worried about being taken over, you don't have to trim it quite yet. But this guy, I would be trimming it soon anyways, just because I don't want these leaves to be shaded by the moss, because the moss grows so much faster than the plant. But there we go. I'll take a few out of there. And then we'll switch out to the intermis here. And this guy he's a bigger plant, so you can see I've allowed the moss to get a little bit fluffier on it in the first place. But I'm still going to harvest some of it. I don't want to harvest all of it. And these cuts I make, the bottom half of the moss will just start to generate a new head. Sometimes it generates a couple new heads. I always like them all looking good, so I don't want to harshly trim it. I want to give the appearance sort of that I haven't trimmed it much at all. But this is a way I slowly multiply my moss too. It multiplies much faster in the pots up above, with much nicer heads on it because they're under lights. And in the summertime they have all the bright light. So if you watch the other video, you'll know that summertime is a dangerous time for this live moss. It's you got to keep it moist and humid all the time, otherwise the heads dry out. Once the head dries out, that head is pretty much dead there. So see, I'm trimming a couple at a time. And there we go. And we'll just take a few more from the lingulata. It's sort of growing up and around in that anyways. There's leaves underneath that I need to expose. I have a few different kinds of moss floating around. I'm taking, I don't know the Latin names of it, but I'm taking all the same stuff. There's a different kind of moss right there. So anyways, I'm just doing my maintenance, but instead of throwing it out, I'm getting it ready to trim on the other plant. It's nice coming in here in the evening and just working on your plants for a few minutes. You get to inspect them a little bit and make sure they're all growing happily. And you get rewarded with the extra moss there that you get to do the next plant with. So even if you can only do 6 plants at first, and then in a couple months you'll be able to do another 7, or another 1, so you have 7, and a couple months later you'll be able to do another 1 or 2, so you have 8 or 9, and slowly they all get done. I try not to worry about it too much. If my plants don't have the moss on, that's okay. For the most part, they grow nicely anyways, but they do seem to benefit just from the higher humidity. And I'm always constantly just giving these guys a quick little spray of water to keep the moss nice and humid. There we go, that looks pretty good. Be very careful when you're in there with your scissors. Could be disastrous if you're not paying attention. And I'm using my scissors just as little tweezers as well. So I'm going to stop there just because I don't want this video to go on forever. There's my little moss heads. You can see the various locations that I've got them. And there's my new little plant. So let me bring in a little bit closer for this. And I'm going to just have a seat because this is a little bit tedious. And I'm just going to take my moss heads and my tweezers here and start replanting the moss. And this again is a tedious part. You need to figure out which way is up on the moss, and I usually plant them about 1 at a time, especially being careful in the beginning. And I kind of use my fingers in there for this. 1 head at a time. So does each plant take probably 15 minutes to do? Yeah, I would say so. By the time you find enough heads of moss to do it, and then actually lay them all out. And I'm just going to continue to do this like so. Every head gets right way up. So I've got enough moss now to continue here because we harvested enough together, but I'm not going to bore you with this tedious part. You're just basically going to keep doing this until the entire surface is covered. If you have to, you can space it out a bit, but I find moss grows better when moss is touching live moss. So if I put one little head way out in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't seem to do as good as if you're working with it all in one clump. So I either start in the center of the plant, like this guy here, to give him some extra humidity now that he's sort of arrived and I know he's going to be healthy. Or if I don't want to overwhelm the plant, say it's too tiny but I want the moss in there, I start in a corner and I just work my way towards the middle, or I start in several corners and leave the middle sort of empty. And I would continue to do that. Whoops. I would continue to do that until we have that look there. And from there I've harvested off of this plant many times to make many other plants. And I've harvested off of my main colony there many times to make many plants. And that is how I do my top dressing of live moss. Kind of tedious, I know, but I love the look of it. The plants seem to be very happy in the moss, and the pictures really form nicely when they're sitting on the live moss as well. So I'm going to continue to do that off camera. I hope you like this video. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching.